I'm Emma, 28 years old now. But this story begins in our quiet suburban neighborhood in Michigan where my childhood slowly crumbled. My stepfather Marcus had a leather belt and his son had an attitude problem. When I was 17, refusing to be Derek's personal servant earned me welts that lasted weeks. That night, I made a decision that changed everything. I left with just $1 in my backpack. What they didn't know was that their cruelty didn't destroy me. It became the foundation for everything I achieved. Before I share how I went from victim to victor, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories about turning pain into power and finding light in the darkest moments. My early years were painted with love and laughter. My biological father, David, was a gentle soul who taught me to ride a bike and helped with my science fair projects every year. I remember how he'd sing off-key lullabies that made me giggle, his warm arms carrying me upstairs when I fell asleep watching movies. He worked as a mechanical engineer, and our garage was filled with his projects. Model airplanes we built together, broken radios he taught me to fix. He called me his little engineer, a nickname that made me beam with pride and feel endlessly loved. But my world collapsed when I was 8. Dad was diagnosed with cancer. The battle lasted 18 months, filled with hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and whispered conversations between my parents that stopped when I entered the room. I watched my strong, capable father grow thin and tired, his hands shaking as he tried to help with my math homework. He died on a Tuesday in October, leaving behind a devastating silence that seemed to echo through every room of our house. Mom, Rebecca, was shattered. For months after the funeral, she moved through our home like a ghost, mechanically going through the motions of daily life. She worked part-time at a dental office, but even that became difficult. I found her crying in Dad's closet, holding his favorite shirt, or staring blankly at photo albums. At 9 years old, I tried to take care of her, making simple meals and doing laundry, anything to bring back the mother I'd known. Then Marcus appeared. He was a colleague from Mom's new full-time job at an accounting firm. At first, he was just the man who brought us groceries and offered to fix our leaky faucet. He had a 15-year-old son named Derek from his first marriage. Marcus seemed charming enough, making Mom smile for the first time in months with his corny jokes and small gestures of kindness. I was grateful to see her laugh again, even though something about Marcus's attention felt calculated, like he was performing rather than genuinely caring. They married just 10 months after Dad died. The ceremony was rushed and small, nothing like the joyful celebration I'd seen in my parents' wedding photos. Mom wore a navy dress she'd bought on sale, and Marcus kept checking his phone during the vows. Derek stood beside his father looking bored and resentful, rolling his eyes when the officiant spoke about love and commitment. "You'll have a big brother now," Mom told me the night before the wedding, forcing brightness into her voice. "Won't that be wonderful?" But Derek never wanted to be my brother. From the moment Marcus moved into our house, Derek made it clear I was an intrusion, an obstacle between him and his father's attention. He was tall and athletic with the same sharp features as Marcus, and a smirk that made my skin crawl. At first, Marcus tried to win me over with gifts and exaggerated interest in my schoolwork. I was polite because it made Mom happy, but something about his behavior felt wrong, like he was studying me, looking for weaknesses. "Such a serious little girl," he'd say, tapping my forehead. "You need to lighten up, Emma. Happy children make happy families." Within 4 months of the wedding, we moved from our cozy ranch home to a large colonial in Riverside Estates, an upscale neighborhood where the houses had circular driveways and perfectly manicured lawns. Marcus said it was for better schools and opportunities, but I missed our old neighborhood where I could walk to my best friend's house, and everyone knew each other's names. The new house had 6 bedrooms, a finished basement, and an in-ground pool that became Derek's private domain. My room was the smallest, located above the garage where the water heater's rumbling became my constant companion. "Isn't this amazing?" Mom asked, spinning in the marble-floored foyer on moving day. "Marcus is so generous to give us all this." That was the first sign of the financial control Marcus would establish. Our old house had been paid off with Dad's life insurance, But Marcus insisted on selling it and investing the proceeds in accounts only he could access. Mom's part-time work became full-time, then included evenings and weekends, but somehow her entire paycheck went toward family expenses that Marcus managed exclusively. The change in my mother was gradual but devastating. The woman who once confronted my third-grade teacher when I was wrongly accused of cheating began to defer to Marcus on everything from grocery shopping to my extracurricular activities. She stopped wearing the colorful scarves and jewelry she loved, switching to the neutral, conservative clothes Marcus preferred. Her laugh, once bright and spontaneous, became quiet and careful. "Marcus knows best," became her standard response. "He's just looking out for all of us." Meanwhile, the favoritism toward Derek grew from subtle to blatant. While I wore clearance items from discount stores, Derek received name-brand clothes and expensive athletic equipment. My request for guitar lessons was deemed too costly, but the same month Derek got a new gaming system and a mountain bike. At restaurants, Marcus would let Derek order appetizers and desserts while scrutinizing my menu choices and often changing them to something cheaper. "You don't need the burger, Emma. The salad is healthier," he'd say, while Derek ordered whatever he wanted without question. By the time I was 11, Derek had learned to manipulate his father perfectly. A simple "Emma was rude to me" could result in my privileges being revoked without investigation. Marcus never questioned Derek's claims, and my denials fell on deaf ears. My mother, once my fierce advocate, became a silent observer. She'd give me sympathetic looks when Marcus wasn't watching and sometimes sneak me small treats or freedoms he denied, but she never openly opposed him or stood firm against his unfair treatment. "Just try to keep the peace," she'd whisper. "Marcus has given us so much security." But what he'd given came with invisible chains, and with each passing month, those chains grew tighter around our lives. I felt like an unwelcome guest in my own home, someone who had overstayed her welcome, but had nowhere else to go. The framed photos of my dad that once filled our old house were reduced to a single picture in my bedroom. When I asked about the others, Mom said they were in storage, but her eyes couldn't meet mine. Later, I found them in the garbage, Marcus having decided they were holding us back from moving forward as a family. That night, I rescued the photos and hid them in my backpack, a secret connection to the love and life I'd lost. Sometimes, when the house was quiet, I'd look at them and tell Dad about my day, imagining what advice he'd give, how he'd make things right if he were still here. But he wasn't here, and slowly I was learning that in Marcus's house, I wasn't just losing my father's memory, I was losing my mother too. By age 13, Marcus had established rigid rules that governed our household, or more accurately, governed me. Derek seemed exempt from most restrictions, creating a stark contrast that became impossible to ignore. My weekdays followed a strict schedule: wake at 5:30 a.m. to prepare breakfast for everyone, attend school, return home immediately to begin chores, complete homework under Marcus's supervision, help prepare dinner, clean up afterward, and be in my room by 8:30 p.m. Weekends weren't for rest, they were for deep cleaning, laundry, and yard work. Derek, meanwhile, slept until noon on weekends. His chores consisted of occasionally emptying his bedroom trash, a task he often forgot without consequences. While I scrubbed floors and cleaned bathrooms, he played video games or hung out with friends. When I questioned this imbalance, Marcus's response was always the same: "Derek has sports and social commitments. You need to learn responsibility and work ethic." The first time Marcus physically hurt me, I was 12. I'd accidentally knocked over his coffee mug while dusting his desk, staining some papers. His grip on my wrist was so tight, it left finger-shaped bruises for days. "Clumsy girl," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "Do you know how important those documents were?" When Mom saw the bruises later, I told her what happened. She frowned and touched the marks gently, then sighed. "He's under tremendous pressure at work, sweetheart. Try to be more careful around his things." That night, I heard them arguing, the only time Mom ever really confronted him about his treatment of me. "She's just a child, Marcus. You can't grab her like that." "Don't tell me how to discipline children," he shot back. "Your permissiveness is exactly why she's so careless." The next morning, Mom made my favorite pancakes but didn't mention the argument. When I tried to discuss Marcus with her, she quickly changed the subject, her eyes darting nervously toward the doorway as if expecting him to appear. These moments of attempted connection with my mother became increasingly rare. Marcus seemed to have a sixth sense for when we were having private conversations, appearing suddenly to interrupt with some urgent task. "Rebecca, I need you to review these insurance papers," or "Emma, didn't I tell you to vacuum the living room?" By 14, the belt had become part of our household vocabulary. It hung in Marcus's study, a thick black leather strap with a heavy silver buckle that caught the light ominously. He never actually used it at first, he didn't need to. The threat was enough. "Don't make me get the belt, Emma," he'd say when I questioned his decisions or tried to advocate for myself. The first time he said it, my mother gasped. By the 10th time, she merely looked away, her silence becoming acceptance of what I couldn't understand. School became my refuge. I threw myself into academics, joining every club that would keep me out of the house until the last possible moment. My straight A's and academic achievements were met with indifference from Marcus. "Grades don't matter if you don't have common sense," he'd say, barely glancing at my report cards. Meanwhile, Derek struggled academically, bringing home C's and D's that Marcus blamed on inferior teachers or a school system that doesn't understand active boys. When Derek was caught plagiarizing an entire essay, Marcus stormed into the school, not to apologize or address Derek's dishonesty, but to argue that the assignment was unnecessarily complex and the teacher was setting students up for failure. My only real friend during this time was Sophia Martinez, a quiet girl from my honors English class who shared my love of poetry. We spent lunch periods discussing books and writing, creating a small bubble of normalcy in my increasingly chaotic life. Sophia was the first to notice the bruises, the way I flinched when touched unexpectedly, how I always asked permission before doing simple things like getting water or using the bathroom. "Are things okay at home?" she asked one day as we walked to biology class. "Of course," I answered too quickly. "Just accident-prone, that's all." But Sophia's parents, Carmen and Luis, weren't easily fooled. When I visited their home, they noticed how I jumped at loud noises, how I ate like someone might take my food away, how I thanked them repeatedly for basic kindness. Carmen, a social worker, would look at me with concerned eyes that made me feel both comforted and terrified. They represented what a family should be: loving, supportive, respectful, making the reality of my home life even more painful by comparison. "You can talk to us about anything," Luis told me once, his kind eyes holding mine. "Anything at all, Mija." But I couldn't. The shame was too overwhelming, the fear too deep. What if no one believed me? What if they contacted Marcus? What if things got worse? A few teachers tried to reach out as well. Mrs. Patterson, my creative writing teacher, kept me after class one day when I submitted a story about a girl trapped in a tower. "This is powerfully written, Emma," she said. "But I'm worried about the themes. Is there something you want to talk about?" I shook my head, forcing a smile. "It's just creative writing, Mrs. Patterson." I was inspired by fairy tales. She didn't look convinced, but didn't push further. I was both relieved and disappointed. Part of me desperately wanted someone to see through my lies, to rescue me from what was happening, but the larger part was terrified of the consequences of speaking the truth. My 16th birthday passed without acknowledgement. Mom whispered happy birthday when Marcus wasn't around and slipped me a card with $20 inside, money that Marcus discovered and confiscated the next day, claiming I needed to learn the value of earning rather than receiving handouts. 2 weeks later, Derek's birthday was celebrated with expensive dinner, lavish gifts, and a party that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. I was expected to help serve his friends, clean up after them, and stay invisible unless needed. That night, as I listened to Derek and his friends laughing downstairs while I scrubbed cake frosting from kitchen counters, something crystallized inside me. The injustice of it all sharpened into a cold, clear understanding. I was not valued in this house. I was not loved. I was tolerated at best, resented at worst. The emotional abuse was constant, belittling comments, comparisons to Derek, isolation from friends and activities. Marcus controlled every aspect of my life, from the clothes I wore to the people I spoke with. My phone usage was monitored, my internet access restricted. I was becoming invisible in my own life, fading a little more each day under the weight of Marcus's control. But it was the physical abuse that left visible scars. The grabbing escalated to shoving, the shoving to slapping. Each incident was followed by guilt-inducing explanations. "Look what you made me do," or "If you just listened, this wouldn't happen." My mother's responses became more pathetic with each incident. "He doesn't mean it," she'd say, or "It's not as bad as it looks." Sometimes she'd cry and promise things would get better, but they never did. Her eyes, once bright with life and love, became dull and avoidant, unable to witness what she couldn't bring herself to stop. The household functioned on fear. My fear of Marcus's temper, Mom's fear of losing financial security, even Derek's fear of disappointing his father, though he channeled it into aggression toward me. We moved around each other like actors in a terrible play, speaking lines we didn't write, playing roles we didn't choose. But the worst was yet to come. And when it did, it would change everything forever. The day that finally broke me started like any other Wednesday. I woke at 5:30, prepared breakfast for the family, and caught the bus to school with hunger gnawing at my stomach. Marcus had complained that the eggs were too runny and dumped my portion in the trash as punishment. School offered its usual respite. I aced a chemistry test, discussed Shakespeare in English class, and spent lunch with Sophia planning our presentation on women in literature. For a few hours, I was just a normal teenager with normal concerns, grades, friendships, college plans. The normalcy shattered the moment I opened our front door at 3:30 p.m. The sound of male laughter and the smell of pizza hit me simultaneously. Derek had friends over. 6 boys from his lacrosse team sprawled across our living room, surrounded by empty pizza boxes, soda cans, and chip bags. The coffee table was sticky with spilled drinks, and muddy cleats had left tracks across the carpet I'd vacuumed that morning. Derek looked up as I entered, a smirk spreading across his face. At 19, he had grown to mirror his father in both appearance and demeanor, broad-shouldered and conventionally handsome, but with cold eyes that calculated rather than connected. "Perfect timing," he said loudly. "Guys, this is the stepsister I was telling you about." I tried to slip past them toward the stairs, but Derek called out, "Hey, we need more sodas and the wings Dad ordered. They're in the kitchen. Bring them out here." I paused, my backpack heavy with textbooks and assignments due tomorrow. "I have homework," I said. "Get them yourself." One of his friends snickered, but Derek's face darkened. "Dad says you're supposed to help when I have friends over." "I didn't know you were having friends over," I replied, fatigue making me bolder than usual. "And I have 2 essays due tomorrow." "Not my problem," Derek shrugged. "The wings are getting cold." Something in me snapped. After a day of being respected by teachers and treated as an equal by peers, reverting to Derek's servant felt unbearable. "I'm not your maid," I said quietly but firmly. "I'm going to do my homework." As I turned to leave, Derek grabbed his phone. "Fine, I'll tell Dad you're being difficult again." I continued upstairs, trying to ignore the dread building in my stomach. Derek's complaints to Marcus always resulted in punishment, but I desperately needed to complete my assignments. Maybe Marcus would be late. Maybe this once he'd listen to my side. An hour later, the front door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs, and I knew immediately that Derek had indeed contacted his father. I quickly saved my English essay and braced myself. Marcus didn't knock. The door flew open, hitting the wall with a crack that made me jump. His face was mottled red, his tie loosened but still hanging around his neck like a noose. "What's this I hear about you refusing to help your brother?" he demanded, his voice deceptively quiet. "I had homework," I explained, gesturing to my laptop. 2 essays due tomorrow. I just needed. "What you need," Marcus cut me off, "is to learn respect." Derek had important friends over. The team captain was there. "And you embarrassed him." "Embarrassed this family." "I didn't." "Don't interrupt me," he roared, making me shrink back against my desk. "You live in my house. eat my food, wear clothes I pay for, and you can't even do the simplest things asked of you. I do everything around here, I said, my voice breaking. I cook, I clean, I get straight A's. Derek does nothing. The comparison to his son was my mistake. Marcus's face contorted with rage as he unbuckled his belt, sliding it through the loops of his pants, with a hiss of leather that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. Stand up, he ordered. Fear froze me to my chair. Please, I whispered.
I'm sorry.
I'll go help now. It's too late for that. Stand up. As I shakily rose, I saw my mother in the doorway behind him, her face pale, one hand covering her mouth. Mom, I pleaded. Please. Her eyes met mine, filled with tears and something worse, resignation. She made a small, helpless gesture with her hands before speaking. Marcus, maybe we could just ground her this time? Stay out of this, Rebecca, Marcus snapped without turning. She needs to learn. The first strike caught me across the back, the pain so sharp and sudden that I couldn't even scream. The second hit my shoulder, the third the back of my legs. I counted 8 lashes in total, each one punctuated by Marcus's labored breathing and my stifled sobs. When it was over, he coiled the belt around his fist, breathing heavily as if he'd exerted himself. No dinner tonight, he announced. Maybe hunger will improve your attitude. As he turned to leave, he addressed my mother, who still stood frozen in the doorway. Make sure she stays in here. I don't want to see her face again tonight. Mom nodded mutely, her eyes downcast. As Marcus brushed past her, she seemed to physically shrink, making herself smaller to avoid contact with him. When we were alone, she finally entered my room, closing the door softly behind her. I lay face down on my bed, each breath sending fresh waves of pain through my body. Let me see, she whispered, gently lifting the back of my shirt. Her sharp intake of breath told me what I couldn't see, that the welts were bad, possibly bleeding. I'll get some ice, she said, her voice trembling. Why didn't you stop him? I asked, the question I'd been holding back for years finally escaping. Mom's hand stilled. You don't understand, Emma. Marcus, he provides for us. We need him. No, we don't, I said, wincing as I sat up to face her. Dad left us the house. You have a job. We were fine before him. It's complicated, she murmured, unable to meet my eyes. Sometimes in life, we have to make compromises. Compromises? I echoed in disbelief. He just beat me with a belt. Lower your voice, she hissed, glancing nervously at the door. You'll make things worse. In that moment, looking at my mother's frightened eyes, I realized a devastating truth. She would never protect me from Marcus. Whether from fear, financial dependence, or some misguided belief that this was what we deserved, she had chosen her path, and it didn't include standing up for me. After she left to get ice, I heard them arguing downstairs. Their voices rose and fell, Mom's pleading tone occasionally breaking through Marcus's deeper rumble. I strained to hear, hope flickering that perhaps she was finally defending me. She's just a teenager, I heard Mom say. The belt was too much, Marcus. Don't tell me how to discipline her, he shot back. Your coddling is why she's so disrespectful. If my father had caught me talking back like that. She's not your child. Mom's voice was louder now, braver than I'd heard in years. There was a pause, then Marcus's voice, deadly quiet. No, she's not. And that's becoming increasingly clear. Another pause, then Mom's voice again, deflated and defeated.
I'm sorry.
I didn't mean, of course you're her father now. Go take her the ice if you must, Marcus said dismissively. But remember who pays the bills in this house, Rebecca. Remember what your life was like before me. When Mom returned with the ice pack, her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands shaky. She helped me apply it to the worst welts, her touch gentle but impersonal, as if she were a nurse treating a stranger. It'll be better tomorrow, she said, the same thing she always said. Just try to get some sleep. After she left, I lay in the darkness, the pain in my body nothing compared to the agony in my heart. The truth I'd been avoiding crashed down with undeniable clarity. No one was coming to save me. Not my mother, not a teacher, not some authority figure who would magically recognize my suffering. If I wanted to survive, I would have to save myself. That night, as the house grew quiet and the welts on my back throbbed in time with my heartbeat, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. I would leave this house, this prison of fear and pain. I would find a way out, no matter what it took. I didn't know yet how I would do it or where I would go. I had no money, no resources, no support system. But as I stared at the ceiling, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. Staying would destroy me. And I refused to be destroyed. For the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. On the surface, I was the obedient stepdaughter, quiet, compliant, invisible. I served Derek and his friends without complaint, cleaned the house to Marcus's exacting standards, and kept my eyes downcast during his lectures on my many failings. The welts on my back faded from angry red to dull purple, then sickly yellow, a calendar of healing marking the days since my decision. But beneath this performance of submission, I was planning my escape with the methodical precision of someone much older than 17. During study periods at school, I used the library computers to research youth shelters and resources for runaways, always careful to clear the browser history afterward. I printed information one page at a time, hiding them between homework assignments in my binder. What I found wasn't encouraging. Most shelters had limited space, strict rules, and maximum stays of 30 days. Foster care seemed equally daunting. Stories of multiple placements and continued abuse made me hesitant to enter the system so close to turning 18. I'd be an adult in 8 months. I just needed to bridge the gap. Money was my biggest obstacle. Marcus controlled my mother's income, and my own earnings from occasional babysitting went straight into a college fund I suspected didn't exist. I started saving my lunch money, skipping meals to tuck away a few dollars each day. Over 3 weeks, I managed to save $34. Not much, but a start. Then disaster struck. Marcus was organizing my room, his euphemism for searching it, and found the cash hidden inside an old book. Planning something? He asked, dangling the bills before me that evening, his voice casual but his eyes sharp. Saving for a school trip. I lied, my heart pounding. All school trips should go through parents, he said. If you need something, I'll handle it. No need for secret money. He pocketed the cash, adding, I'll put this toward your college fund. That night, a new lock appeared on the outside of my bedroom door. Just a precaution, Marcus explained to my mother. She's been acting erratic lately. Sometimes teenagers sleepwalk. It's for her safety. The lock was only used when they were sleeping or out of the house, but its message was clear. I was now a prisoner in my own home. Marcus also increased his monitoring in other ways, checking my backpack daily, requiring detailed explanations for any school expenses, even timing my bathroom breaks to prevent dawdling. I needed a new plan, and fast. At school, I finally confided in Sophia, carefully sharing some of my situation while downplaying the worst aspects. Even this edited version made her eyes widen with concern. You can stay with us, she offered immediately. My parents would understand. I considered it briefly, but the Martinezes lived just 2 miles from us. It would be the first place Marcus would look, and I couldn't risk bringing his wrath down on the only people who had shown me genuine kindness. Thanks, but I need to get farther away, I admitted. Somewhere he can't find me easily. Sophia bit her lip, then reached into her backpack and pressed $60 into my hand. My birthday money, she explained. Take it, please. That money became my new secret, hidden more carefully this time in the lining of my winter jacket hanging forgotten in the back of my closet during the warm spring weather. Through more research, I discovered a youth program in Detroit, about 3 hours away by bus, that offered transitional housing and education support for teens in crisis. They had a residential program that included counseling, high school completion assistance, and job placement. It seemed perfect, far enough away to be safe, structured enough to provide stability. I needed to gather essential documents: birth certificate, social security card, school records. These would likely be in Marcus's home office, a room I was forbidden to enter without supervision. I would have to time it perfectly, perhaps during one of his weekend golf outings with clients. The opportunity came on a Saturday when Marcus took Derek to a lacrosse tournament in Grand Rapids. They would be gone overnight, leaving just Mom and me at home. Mom had plans to visit her sister for the day, giving me a precious window to search the office. I waited until her car disappeared down the street, then headed straight for Marcus's sanctuary. The heavy oak door opened silently. I had oiled the hinges the day before while dusting. Inside, the room smelled of leather and Marcus's cologne, scents that made my stomach clench with fear. The filing cabinet yielded nothing but business documents and tax records. His desk drawers contained office supplies and a flask of bourbon. I was beginning to panic when I spotted a small safe tucked behind a row of law books. It would certainly contain important documents and would certainly be locked. I tried obvious combinations: Marcus's birthday, Derek's birthday, their anniversary, with no success. As precious minutes ticked by, desperation set in. I was about to give up when I noticed a framed photo on the bookshelf, showing Marcus standing beside a classic Mustang with its license plate clearly visible, ACCT 68. With trembling fingers, I tried various combinations using those numbers and letters. Finally, 6-8-0-1 clicked the safe open. Inside, I found exactly what I was looking for: a blue folder containing family documents. My birth certificate was there, along with my social security card and several report cards Marcus had intercepted before I could show them to Mom. I took only what belonged to me, carefully replacing everything else exactly as I'd found it. As I was closing the safe, I noticed a manila envelope labeled David Wilson Estate. My father's name made me pause. Inside were documents related to the sale of our old house, and my heart stopped. A copy of my father's will showed that a trust had been established for my education. According to the statement inside, that trust contained over $40,000, money that Marcus now controlled as my legal guardian. Money I would never see unless I escaped. I returned everything to the safe except my own documents, which I slipped into the back of my calculus textbook, the one place Marcus would never look. When Mom returned home, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, at the kitchen table working on homework. If she noticed my shaking hands or flushed face, she didn't mention it. That night, I took stock of my resources: $60 from Sophia, my student ID, the essential documents, and a single dollar bill I found in an old birthday card for my father. $61 to start a new life. It wasn't much, but it was everything I had. The next week brought increased tension at home. Marcus seemed suspicious, watching me more closely than usual. Twice I caught him in my room when I returned from school, though he claimed he was checking for maintenance issues. My backpack was searched more thoroughly, my phone examined for unauthorized calls or messages. "Your attitude concerns me," he said at dinner one night, pointing his fork at me like a weapon. "You've been too quiet lately. What are you hiding?" "Nothing," I answered, eyes on my plate. "Just focused on schoolwork." "Look at me when I'm talking to you," he snapped. I raised my eyes, careful to keep my expression neutral despite the hatred burning in my chest. "That's better," he said with a cold smile. "Remember, Emma, I'm always watching. Always." That night, as I lay awake listening to the house settle, I heard my mother's soft footsteps approach my door. She slipped something underneath, a small envelope containing $30 and a note. "For the book you wanted. Love, Mom." It was both a peace offering and an acknowledgement of Marcus's theft. Too little, too late, but it brought my escape fund to $91. Enough for a bus ticket to Detroit and maybe a few meals. The next evening, Marcus threatened worse punishment after I forgot to start the dishwasher. As he loomed over me, I caught the familiar scent of alcohol on his breath and saw his hand drift toward his belt buckle. "Just do what he says," my mother whispered from across the kitchen. "It's easier." In that moment, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The next opportunity would be my last chance in this house, regardless of whether my plans were complete. Better to leave with $91 and incomplete preparation than to stay for one more strike of Marcus's belt. That night, I packed a small backpack with essentials: 2 changes of clothes, my documents, toiletries, a notebook, and the photo of my dad. I wore my warmest jeans and layered 2 shirts under my jacket, both to maximize what I could take and to provide some protection should Marcus catch me before I escaped. I set my phone alarm for 4 a.m., early enough that both Marcus and Derek would be deeply asleep, but late enough that I could catch the first bus downtown at 5:30. As I finally drifted off to sleep, my last thought was of my mother. I was leaving her behind in this house of horrors, but I had to believe she was making her own choice to stay. At 17, my first responsibility had to be to myself, a lesson I'd learned from her failure to protect me. Tomorrow, I would be free, or I would face consequences worse than any I'd experienced before. There was no middle ground left. The shrill beep of my phone alarm at 4 a.m. sent adrenaline coursing through my body. I silenced it instantly, heart pounding as I listened for any movement in the house. Nothing but the familiar creaks of the heating system and the distant hum of the refrigerator broke the pre-dawn silence. I was already dressed, having slept in my clothes. The backpack I'd prepared sat ready beside my bed, containing everything I could safely take, which wasn't much. My hands trembled as I zipped up my jacket and shouldered the bag, its weight both a burden and a reminder of how little I truly possessed in this house. $91 in my pocket. A handful of documents proving my existence. 1 photograph of happier times. A single dollar bill that had somehow survived Marcus's scrutiny, the dollar that would become symbolic of my new beginning. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of living in luxury surrounded by expensive things, I was leaving with less than most homeless people carried. Yet I felt lighter than I had in years, the anticipation of freedom outweighing my fear of the unknown. The bedroom door opened with a soft click. Marcus hadn't bothered locking it last night, confident in his psychological control over me. I paused in the doorway, looking back at the room that had been my prison cell for years, the narrow bed with its faded pink comforter, the desk where I'd studied while nursing bruises, the window.